Hey everyone, how's it going? For those of you who are new here, my name is Jacob Williams. I am a professional music producer and composer. Today is going to be a little different than the usual uploads that you guys are used to. So normally we react to albums or fresh songs that I haven't heard yet. And well, coming up, we're going to be doing things called re-listens where I check out albums that I'm already aware of or I've already listened to quite a bit, and I sort of do the same thing where I do my usual listen to the track and break cool things down, things that I hear that are interesting. Maybe they're things that you guys have heard as well, and you know, it kind of opens the discussion and it's a fun thing to talk about. But today we're going to be doing something a little different. So to provide some background, the other day while I was backing up stuff on my computer and kind of getting stuff ready for the week, I had a fun idea to take the concept of what are like my top albums or my top like pieces of music that I would listen to for the rest of my life if I could, or like, you know, just timeless albums to me that I absolutely love. And that's such a weird question, right? Because our musical tastes are always changing. Even while I was thinking about this question, I was like, well, the answer to that question would have been completely different forever ago. And by the time that you are seeing this video, it will be Wednesday, October 8th, which marks my 28th year on this planet. That's a lot of years to be here, but it's also a lot of time to be enjoying our favorite thing to talk about on this channel, which is music. Turning 28 means that I have been producing music for about 14 to 15 years now, which is just insane. I started in late middle school, early high school. I didn't really get a good grip on things until closer to college. I kind of just did a lot of experimenting and did a lot of like, put this here, and I'm just gonna be blunt, guys. I made a lot of bad, really bad music. But from all those bad pieces of work came a lot of lessons that I learned and was able to kind of put into other things that I'm doing now. And I was able to sort of compartmentalize all of those lessons, and now things are just different. And I'm able to look back on all this time and go, what inspired me to sort of keep going? What kept me inspired to keep creating and to keep making unique pieces of art? Over time, my music taste has changed, and probably the same with the rest of you guys that watch these videos. You probably started somewhere with music, and now you're here and your taste is XYZ, whether that's artists, bands, rappers, albums, releases. Maybe you just listen to soundtracks. Everyone's got their own taste. That's what makes music so wonderful, is there's so many different styles and genres out there for us to enjoy and to discover. And while I was thinking about this big concept of what would be like my top albums of all time, I was like, that's going to be a lot. So I gave myself a number. I was like, okay, 10. Well, that just wasn't enough. Like, there's just so much more music out there that I would consider just timeless pieces of art that I enjoy. So I was just like, all right, we're going to do 50. 100 is way too much. Even 50 is already a lot. It's already pushing it. But I was like, all right, we're going to stop with 50. And my entire goal with this was I wanted to make a nice little background for my music studio computer so I could get inspired every time I turn it on and just see the artworks of my favorite albums before I go to work. And I was thinking about it and I was like, what if I broke down exactly, even if it's just small blurbs here and there, what if I broke down exactly what I found awesome or timeless about these pieces of work? And I was like, I know, that's a spontaneous upload for Wednesday. And I know it's completely different than what we normally do here, but I figured, hey, it's a fun little video idea, and happy birthday to me. I'm going to talk about myself, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's move forward with the 50th album on here. And before I do that, shout out to my patrons. You guys are awesome. I appreciate all your guys' support with all of this content that I've been putting out. You guys have been giving me a lot of power to do that. So everyone, give lots of love to our patrons. Going through this, I'm going to try to keep them short. I'm going to try to only talk about things for about like 30 seconds before I move on to the next one, but I do tend to blab, so Lord help me in editing. That's all I'm going to say. Some artists or bands or even albums on this list could be controversial or sensitive to some individuals. So I'm going to do you guys a favor, and I'm going to include with this video a pinned comment and a section in the description with timestamps that lead to every album that I'm talking about on this list. So if there's someone that you don't want to hear any sort of details about, you can go ahead and just click through the list. Or even if you're excited to hear what I think about Taylor Swift's 1989, you can go right ahead to that timestamp. I'm going to put them in the description, and I'll also put them in the comment section for you guys because. Number 50 on the list is Badlands by Halsey. So this album came out a little bit before I discovered it, actually. I was nearing kind of college around the time this came out, and I really resonated around the time I heard it. I think I heard Gasoline first. It was either Gasoline or Castle. And I really enjoyed the production. Then I found out Lido produced pretty much the whole album, or produced a good majority of the tracks on here. And I felt like Halsey's singing style and songwriting ability was very unique for the time this came out. And even finding out that this album is turning 10 years old, it is an incredible sort of landmark, I would say, for kind of her first studio album and her first piece of work that she put out into the world. So it's crazy looking back on the fact that that's been 10 years since I heard this, but I really like the overall electro pop, synth pop revival vibes that this album had. I feel like it brought us from the early 2010s sound into sort of a later 2010s pop sound. Number 49, Mothership by Dance Gavin Dance. So this album, I'm going to provide a little bit of history when it comes to my relationship with this band. So I did not get into Dance Gavin Dance until way later. Tillian was already the lead vocalist of the band, so they had already gone through multiple eras of the band's sound, as well as lead vocalists and songwriting styles. But one thing has stayed the same throughout all of Dance Gavin Dance's musical catalog is their quality and sort of like shape of their music. They blend post-hardcore with a decent amount of pop punk, emo, just straight up alternative rock, and what I would call like Weedle pop funk. Like I know that sounds just kind of strange, but that's just what I view it as. They kind of have this nice little like funky sound to their music, but also just monstrous breakdowns. They're the perfect band if you like very pop oriented choruses and also just brutal, fantastic post-hardcore metalcore breakdowns. I put this album here because I feel like it's kind of their peak in terms of their songcraft and also their energy as a band, and really just the whole band's dynamic between Matt's drumming, Will's guitar playing, and the different vocalists trading between each other. And rest in peace, Tim, for being a crucial part of this band's legacy. Moving on to album 48, The Path of Totality by Korn. This album, in my opinion, and again, another thing, these are all just my opinions. These are just things that I feel when I talk about and listen to these albums. So please take everything I say with a grain of salt. This album to me is very much rock and metal's greatest experiment, especially of the 2010s, because I feel like this album doesn't get a whole lot of credit for pushing rock in more of an electronic direction. Sure, we can argue that other new metal bands and other metal bands like Linkin Park kind of did it first, and Bring Me the Horizon started working with remixers. Same with Asking Alexandria started working with remixers to bring electronic sounds into metal and metalcore. But this right here was a band actually taking the time to collaborate with producers in the lanes of electro house, dubstep, drum and bass, genres that were very prevalent at the time in the EDM and club scenes. And it really created this nice, cohesive, heavy sound that was unique to the band. No one else was doing this at the time. Around the time this got announced, bands started also tinkering with sounds that were similar and started creating these very synthetic metal, new metal, and metalcore sounds with electronica in it. But I feel like Korn kind of got to it first before a lot of other bands did, and they don't really get the credit that they deserve for it, in my personal opinion. The shortcomings of this album do kind of stick over time. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that lyrically this is a great album. I do feel like Korn isn't really a pen game type of band, but if I were to sit here and sort of put my finger on why I would want this in one of my all-time, like if I was stuck on an island forever listening to these 50 albums, why I would keep it here is just because of the overall ingenuity that went into it. And some of the songs still slap to this day. I think Kill Mercy Within and My Wall are some of the heaviest songs in Korn's discography, and it has a really nice atmosphere because of the synthetic work done in the production. Moving on to album 47, Girl Chasing Butterfly by Softheart. So Softheart is a very important artist to me. I feel like she is an artist that is very underappreciated and very under-recognized in music. I think that this album is a special piece of work, and that's really going to be the only thing that I say about it, because I feel like in order to fully understand it, you have to kind of listen to it yourself. I will not genre it, and I will just leave it blank. I'm actually going to leave a link for you guys to check it out in the description, because I personally feel like it's a beautiful album, and it's a little DIY. It's a little 2020s kind of SoundCloud era of music, but I do feel like it deserves a chance for everyone's ears, so I'm gonna leave that to you guys to go check it out. Moving on to album 46, Sanctuary EP by KOAN Sound and Asa. So this is a bit of an abstract one. As you guys know, my roots in production are in EDM. And when I first heard this EP, it was one of those releases that I wish I could have gone back and had a first listen to again. And the reason being is because this EP had such an interesting flow between all 5 tracks that are on it. It felt very progressive. It meshed things like liquid drum and bass, chill step, jazz, and just overall electronica in such an interesting way and an interesting formula that I have not heard done since. And before this release, I had not heard anything done like that. I do feel like KOAN Sound and Asa respectfully have gone separate ways from this sound. This sound was kind of just a special moment for this era of both of their music. And respectfully, all the producers involved on this album are really great at what they do, fantastic at making sounds, but I feel like this was a very special moment in EDM that, in my opinion, is overlooked, and I want to keep it on this list of albums to just celebrate forever, just me personally. Album 45, Infinity on High by Fall Out Boy. This to me is Fall Out Boy's most genuine work, and it's also their most catchy songwriting work ever across their whole career. And that's not to undersell any of their latest releases, as well as any releases that came before that are just as iconic, such as Under the Cork Tree. This album is one of those albums where, to me, every song on it sounds like a single. Everything about it just has such an energy to it, and it has such a unique take on pop punk. So I had to throw some sort of pop punk album on here, and when I thought about it, I was like, Fall Out Boy, Infinity on High. And whenever I'm in the mood for this said type of genre, I always put on Infinity on High or a song from it. Because the Internet by Childish Gambino. So this album came out while I was in high school, and there's going to be a couple of albums on here where I mention this, but in my personal opinion, 2012 and 2013 were very special years for hip hop as a whole. I feel like a lot of great albums came out around that time, and it's also just when I started diving into the genre a bit deeper. Instead of just listening to artists like Eminem and 50 Cent, I started actually pushing myself to check out new artists that were sort of coming out with big projects, and to sort of hear what other artists in the genre had to say instead of just what I was used to. I was pretty surprised with albums like this because it got me further into the rabbit hole of just other great projects by other great rappers, and this was one of them. I don't consider Childish Gambino or Donald Glover to be just a rapper. I think he's a fantastic actor. He also writes. He is a phenomenal singer, as heard on his album Awaken My Love. Some of those qualities of his other art forms started really taking shape on this project, as opposed to just some singing and a little bit of rapping on Camp. I feel like because the internet really showed Donald Glover's tendency to lean into that cinematic form of writing, and it also showed that you can do that kind of thing with a rap album. You can make a rap album that has some sort of story behind it or has some sort of moving narrative with it. And I thought it was done really well. Sempiternal by Bring Me the Horizon. This album is a staple for metalcore fans. I think across the board, it's highly praised for the unique riffs on it, as well as Jordan Fish's production being brought to the band, and just the overall new air that this brought to the genre as a whole. I've heard various opinions over the years, like ever since this album came out, bands have been striving for that sound. I don't necessarily personally agree with that, but I do think that this inspired a lot of bands to really focus on their writing instead of just making jam sessions out of breakdowns and riffs and screaming. I think this definitely gave bands the courage to try adding things like clean vocals, try adding things like electronic tinged and cinematic like production beds into their work. And just to overall go against the grain a little bit, don't stick to such a safe, tried and true formula in metalcore. Try things that might be a little polarizing. And this album was a little polarizing at first. I remember there were some kids at my high school that were just like, have you heard Shadow Moses? Have you heard Shadow Moses? Have you heard Sleepwalking? And I think that conversation was very important for young metalcore fans as well as older listeners of the genre. Untrue by Burial. This might surprise you guys because I tend to lean a bit more pop. I tend to lean a bit more structured, but this album is beautiful front to back. It's very skeletal. It's very dark. It's a great background music album. It's really good for times where you just kind of want to zone out or focus. It's a very old album, and it has influenced a lot of music that is dear to me, And I didn't check it out until I found that out. Until I found out that two-step and garage directly influenced dubstep, I was like, I don't know about that. You know, I'm kind of used to this nice, polished, growly, destructive, aggressive music over here. Why would I want to go check out this pure, true to form kind of music over here? And I was surprised. I mean, Archangel really, every time I heard it, just put me into a trance. It really let me kind of relax and get into my sort of happy place and into my zone. Same with Near Dark or Ghost Hardware. These are all songs that mean a lot to me, and so I wanted to put this album on here. Astroworld by Travis Scott. This album was in direct tie with Birds in the Trap. So I did not get into Travis Scott's discography until Birds in the Trap. I started listening to stuff before that, like Days Before Rodeo, and I think Owl Pharaoh as well. Not as much, but I did check out some of his earlier mixtapes around the time that came out. And Birds in the Trap had that perfect energy that I needed in a hip-hop record. Astroworld built on that, and funny enough, I actually didn't like it at first. I thought it was a little all over the place and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense. But when you think about what the concept of Astroworld is supposed to be, this album felt like a carnival of hip-hop tracks. It felt like you're literally going to this outrageous, fun, kind of dark, kind of chaotic festival or party or amusement park, and the music on this album is supposed to like accompany that. And I think there's a lot of moments on here where Travis sort of sheds the hip hop bravado and trades it for moments of sincerity, like on Astro Thunder or on Coffee Bean. Even Butterfly Effect has a bit more of that. I've always really liked Travis's ability to be more melodic, especially in the rap scene. I think that has influenced a lot of other MCs to take up that style as well. Quest for Fire by Skrillex. We're going to talk about Skrillex a little later in this video, but I will touch on this album a little bit. When this came out, I felt like it was a beautiful comeback for him into the music space with a big major release, as well as the album Don't Get Too Close, which I think was equally as good. I know people are kind of torn between the poppier stuff versus the more rough, true to form dubstep stuff that's on this, but I personally feel like this, coupled with Don't Get Too Close, is the perfect evolution of his sound, and I'm so glad that he took the steps necessary to take years back from producing to come back fully inspired with this masterpiece. Calamari Tuesday by Feed Me. I feel like Feed Me is one of the more underrated artists in EDM just as a whole. Feed Me can make anything between like electro, progressive, retro house, drum and bass, breaks. Feed Me is also known as the drum and bass artist Spore. And Calamari Tuesday was an interesting album because it's a nice mixed bag of all kinds of stuff that he is capable of producing. You have glitch hop in here, you have electro house, progressive house, dubstep, even elements of breaks in there. I think there's a future garage track on it too. One thing that I thought was pretty brave about it is EDM isn't really an album genre. Like, it kind of favors singles and club hits more than it does albums. If anything, more people release EPs in EDM because it's just an easier way to experiment with new sounds. But I thought it was really daring to put out a full, I think this thing had 15 tracks when it came out, and or maybe it was 16. It's a huge album, and I thought it was very colorful and very well done. Siouxsie and the Banshees Greatest Hits. So this album right here is not really an album. It's a greatest hits compilation, but it contains all of my favorite songs from the band, as well as a cover of Dear Prudence by the Beatles. This album is on here because if I were stuck on a desert island with 50 albums, I would want the hits from this band. Again, very dark, very brooding, got me into post-punk at a very young age. This was one of my like childhood kind of car seat albums. And yeah, I just really like the overall atmosphere of this band, and I think it has aged pretty well over the years. I can listen to Kiss Them For Me and Cities and Dust pretty much alongside any other alternative track in my playlist, and it would actually fit quite well. Man on the Moon by Kid Cudi. This album right here would be in probably a lot of people's top 10, top 20, top 30 albums, especially if you're a hip hop head, and I could definitely tell you why. Kid Cudi kind of explores different roots of hip hop and was one of the first rappers, in my opinion, to sort of shed that more emotional side of lyric writing. Kid Cudi also is very influenced by the band MGMT, so a lot of those alternative and indie roots flow through some of his songwriting and choices on the beats being made on here. Shout out to Dot Genius for making these. Some of my favorite songs on here are Up Up and Away and Sky Might Fall, which I believe was actually produced by Kid Cudi himself. And back in the day, rappers didn't really produce a lot of their own cuts. Eternal Blue by Spiritbox. This, in my opinion, is the most beautiful metal album you could ever listen to front to back. I didn't expect to put it on here in my top 50, but when I thought about metal albums in particular that have kind of changed how I view the genre or changed how I personally feel about metalcore as a whole and where I can kind of see the genre going in the future, it would be this one. I think this album not only helped Spiritbox sort of mature and push their sound into the directions that we see now on albums like Tsunami Sea, as well as the Fear of Fear. Pretty Odd by Panic at the Disco. This album was directly tied with Vices and Virtues, and it was a very hard decision to make, for sure. Pretty Odd made the list because, in my opinion, the songs can stand the test of time a bit more. This is when the band was influenced by the Beatles and the Yardbirds a lot, so they were listening to a lot of classic psychedelic rock. I believe this album was also recorded at Abbey Road Studios. I even have it on vinyl because I think it's just such an iconic album. It has 9 in the Afternoon on it, for Pete's sake. And, it's just every song on it just gets in your head. Then there's such fun songs to sing too. I think it's a good album to listen to for like a general audience as well, not just if you like pop punk or emo music. I think they're just good songs overall. And I think for it being their second album coming off of A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, I think that it was a very bold move that paid off pretty well because it showed that the band wasn't afraid to make changes. And every single album after, even when Brandon was kind of the sole member of the band, proceeded to do that and sort of change the status quo with each release. Hell Is What You Make It by Breathe Carolina. So yeah, this might be another strange one on this list, but this album's very nostalgic to me. Just reminds me of high school. It was one of the more, in my opinion, mature albums to come out of the sort of emo pop, electro pop sort of circle. This to me is what Breathe Carolina was all about, which is mixing that electronic club feel with emotional lyrics, with pop punk and post-hardcore tendencies. And I think this album, although it's a little dated, sounds incredible to this day in my book. The Eminem Show by Eminem. This to me is Eminem's kind of sort of like pinnacle of his work, or it's a good album to sort of come back to as you experience some of his newer works. Who doesn't like When the Music Stops featuring D12? That to me is such a great example of what a rap posse track should be. There's a lot that I could say about Eminem's catalog as a whole and about him as an artist, but I would say that this is probably my favorite piece of work out of his entire catalog, next to Recovery, Marshall Mathers LP1. 1989 by Taylor Swift. Some of you guys probably want to hear about this one, and I'm going to try not to blab about it. I think this is the epitome of what 80s revival pop is and should be, alongside bands like Churches that also did it quite well, where we take some of the grooves, some of the melodies, some of the hooks that are near and dear to us from the 80s, and we bolster them with modern high-fidelity production, better sampling, better drum machines, arguably, right? Because sometimes we like that warm, crunchy vinyl sound. And also, what Taylor did a really good job on this album was not just sticking to the same sound throughout the album. Songs like I Know Places and Clean were great examples of pushing that sound in more of a experimental pop direction, if you will. It kind of pushes the boundaries of what 2010s pop could have been, and I think this album has inspired a lot of pop artists ever since it released. Watching Movies with the Sound Off by Mac Miller. This album surprisingly was in my opinion one of the best rap albums of 2013. I don't even like calling it a rap album because to me Mac Miller was kind of this unique, he was a rapper but he also sang, but he was also deeply influenced by jazz, so you kind of have this nice crossroads of rock, hip-hop, jazz, indie, dream pop, shoegaze, kind of little bit of electronic in there, but it's mostly a lot of jazz influence on this album. And songs like Objects in the Mirror Avian, The Star Room, Killing Time featuring Nicki Rhonda. Those songs to me have always stuck with me. Same with Euphoria. Euphoria is a beautiful song. And there's also some really great features on here, from Action Bronson to Absol to Earl Sweatshirt. I think this album was kind of it was kind of like my core album I went to when I was sort of in my big hip hop phase in 2013, which is funny because there were also just there were like so many good albums that came out around that time. And I actually didn't like Mac Miller at first. I didn't want to like Mac Miller. When I heard a couple songs off of Blue Slide Park and then some things off of Macadelic, especially Loud, it just wasn't really my kind of music. Like it maybe worked for some other kids in high school, but it just wasn't really my thing. I never gravitated towards it. And I think I heard SDS and thought, okay, this is different. And then I found out Flying Lotus did production for it. And so I started pushing myself in more of this direction to check out the full project. And I was very pleasantly surprised while checking it out. It is a wonderful piece of work. Rest in peace, Mac. You made a masterpiece with this. And shout out to it being well over 10 years of this thing being out. And yeah, I think this allowed Mac to have the confidence to move forward, doing many other delightful sounds with albums to follow this. And this will forever be in my top 50, top 30, whatever you want to call it, albums. It definitely will keep a space up here for sure. Phobia by Breaking Benjamin. So this album has a lot of classics on it for a lot of people. To me, it was car seat music when I was a kid. This introduced me to some of the more darker yet melodic and brooding sounds of nu metal, and it's definitely very special to me. I had an opportunity to see this band live recently, and I think they played like 6 songs off of this thing, even some that weren't singles, and it was a beautiful experience. So yeah, this is definitely a favorite of mine. That's The Spirit by Bring Me the Horizon. I believe this is the only other album from them that I have on here. This album kind of saw them going in more of a just straightforward rock direction, still keeping some of their metal and nu metal influences on here, but they definitely experimented more with popular sounds, more like pop centric sounds. I believe Ollie and Jordan said that they were inspired by bands like Interpol and Panic at the Disco, and that's definitely heard. You can definitely hear it in a lot of the background and a lot of the production beds on this album. It's a very, despite the album cover being just black and white, it's a very colorful album, and songs like Doomed, Run, as well as Blasphemy are some of their most unique songs even to date that they've ever written. It warms my heart that this album still has a lot of well-played songs on it, and I believe the fan base still appreciates it because I think it was a very hallmark sound in their entire catalog as a band. Album title goes here by Deadmau5. So Deadmau5 was a artist that was, again, very influential to me when I started producing. However, the sound of house music kind of got lost on me a lot early on. I was very into the very aggressive, bass heavy, angsty, dubstep drum and bass sound more than I was house, but something kept drawing me back to Deadmau5 songs. And I think despite them being repetitive progressive house songs, I kept coming back because the sound design was beautiful. I think a lot of what Joel does with some of his songs is he tries to make them sound very much like a soundscape or like a soundtrack. And however that gets packaged at the end of it, who cares? If it's a really distorted electro house song or if it's a song that is very drawn out and just has mostly kicks until like about the 6-7 minute mark and it's just a big explosion of synths, so be it. This was tied with 4 times 4 equals 12, which is also just equally as great of an album. I think if you have never listened to EDM in your life, I think album title goes here probably has a lot of variety for you. The reason why I like it so much is because there's songs on here that aren't even house. Like, they don't even have his signature 4x4 kick drum style on here. There's even a collaboration with Cypress Hill as well as Imogen Heap on here that don't even sound like club music at all. Same with, I think, Sleepless is also a song that doesn't follow that typical formula. Dude, there's even a collaboration with Gerard Way on here. It's such an interesting album for the EDM circle, because like I mentioned earlier, EDM is not album friendly, but deadmau5 always finds a way. And I had the blessing of seeing him live. I want to say it's like nearing a decade ago now. And it was a wonderful experience. Yeezus by Kanye West. This was Kanye's sort of like experimental album. It was very, I mean, it's even considered experimental hip hop. It's a darker album. It is a short album as well. It's only 10 tracks. This album's special to me because when it came out, I was trying to kind of go outside my comfort zone and try out other music. I was used to Kanye's sound on albums like 808s and Heartbreak, as well as Graduation. In fact, this album on this list is directly tied with both of those albums because of how influential they are to me from a sound standpoint. Songs like On Sight, as well as Hold My Liquor, mostly Hold My Liquor, Guilt Trip, are songs that I always lean on for inspiration if I'm making things that are very in the lane of just stuttery, glitchy, industrial sounding, very metallic, distorted, yet beautifully melodic rap cuts. Or even if they're not rap influenced, even if I'm doing industrial or garage, this is a great album to lean on for inspiration. So I'd love to keep it in my top 50. Beautiful Oblivion by Issues. This band is incredible. I've loved everything they've done. They really don't have a single song that misses in their discography. I think it always took them so long to come out with albums back when they were active because of how much time they put into their art. You can hear it. And this album was a beautiful album to end their career with because it definitely encapsulated everything about them that made them incredible. They were melodic. They had a lot of R&B influence, a lot of country influence even, and they still kept their metalcore, post-hardcore, and pop-punk roots intact all the way till the end. They didn't really get a lot of credit until later on for being progressive, because even since the beginning on their Black Diamonds EP, you can hear the prog metal influence of Meshuggah all over the riffs on that thing. Same with up until this point. Even on albums like Headspace and Self-Titled, it's very apparent that these guys listen to a lot of progressive metal, and blending that with pop, R&B, country, and alternative rock has definitely done a lot for the scene, and I think that is definitely something to be celebrated. Playing in the Shadows by Example. So this is a weird one. This is a really weird one, actually, because I don't even know if a lot of people that are going to watch this video even know who Example is. He is a singer, songwriter, producer, and rapper, I believe from the UK, and his sound was pretty influential to me in my dubstep EDM days because he had more of those songwriter elements in his catalog. He would mix that with bass drops and build-ups and sort of beat breaks. Also, he had a tendency to work with a lot of EDM producers to get certain sounds out of certain songs, and you could hear it if he was working with Feed Me, like mentioned earlier, or if he was working with Scream. Those songs came out sounding completely different. And to have, 12 or 13 different producers on this album really added to the diversity of how dynamic this project came out sounding. Beerbongs and Bentleys by Post Malone. So I pretty much love every Post Malone project, so it's kind of hard to just put one on here, but Beerbongs was where Posty started kind of going a bit more experimental, played a little less safe. I feel like Stoney was a great debut, but it kind of showed him sort of leaning on what was safe, what was accepted of him, and rightfully so, because I know even when he came out, he was pretty controversial, and a lot of people in hip-hop felt like he was using the genre as a vehicle. I don't personally necessarily agree with that statement, but that's just how I feel about it. I think it's completely okay to start somewhere and to evolve with whatever your intuition tells you to do. Just recently, he made a really amazing country album, and some of those country roots can be heard not just on this, but even the album before it. I absolutely love this album front to back, and it's a great experience. Sincerely by Steven. Some of you guys might not know who Steven is. He originally used to go by Steven Schwartz, and he used to be a dubstep producer and DJ. Later on, he kind of went dark for a while and rebranded himself as just Steven. And this album is a masterpiece, in my opinion. If you're kind of looking for like a genre-less artist to listen to, like someone who kind of just doesn't really stick in one lane, I would highly recommend this project, as well as the project that came after that, which I'll pop up right here. This album in particular got me really into his music, and he's definitely an artist that doesn't drop music a lot. Definitely kind of takes his time on things and comes out with projects when they're full, when they're done, but each one is to be celebrated and appreciated. Immersion by Pendulum. So these guys just came back. They just got back together in these recent years and started dropping music, started touring again. I really want to see them live. This album was detrimental to my production roots, along with Skrillex, deadmau5, and other mentioned producers of that era of EDM. What I liked about Pendulum is from the moment I heard Witchcraft, I told myself, this is different. This is not just an EDM album. This is not just a dance album. It's also not just a drum and bass album. These guys mix all kinds of rock and metal tendencies into their music, as well as just very beautiful melodies. To me, this album kind of told like a story of sorts, front to back. I feel like a lot of people might listen to it and just hear kind of the beats and the bangers, and that's totally fine. But to me, I felt like there was a deeper narrative with this album, and I still can't even tell you what that is, but it's a great experience. Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar. Speaking of narratives, this is the most well done narrative album in hip-hop history, in my opinion. And it got me way more into hip-hop because it showed me what you could do with the genre. Like, it's not just for the club, it's not just for bars. You can actually tell full stories across an entire hip-hop project. I've recommended this album to tons of people throughout my life. I think it's definitely something you have to listen to because the full thing front to back has such a great narrative about Kendrick's struggle in some of his early adolescent days, and I think it's well worded across this entire project. I think Shireen has a great Treehouse by Icy Stars. The album art of this album can definitely tell you what it might sound like. It's very atmospheric. It's very haunting. This was kind of the pinnacle of the band's sound. I do really like what they put out recently. I thought The Wheel was a great way to change things up. This is when Devin Oliver, the lead singer of the band, kind of took over on both clean singing and screams. And also when his brother took over on synths and production as opposed to drumming for the band. And I think the whole shift in the band's dynamic in terms of how they play really came through on this album. Running with Scissors is just a dynamic masterpiece with its high breakdowns and its low melodic sections. Yellow King and Calm Snow are some of the coolest album intros and outros I've heard really in my whole life. So if you're a post-hardcore head and you haven't heard this album yet, I would recommend it. It leans a bit more butt rock than it does post-hardcore and pure metalcore, but I love it. It's near and dear to my heart. Speaking of butt rock, we're going to talk about Avenged Sevenfold. The White album is incredible front to back. Even some of the more least popular cuts like Brompton Cocktail and Lost are replays for me. I think this is when the band it was unfortunately their last big studio offering with the Rev, rest in peace, but they really showed that they are a heavy progressive take on bands like Guns N' Roses from the 80s and the 90s. They have a very raw, organic sound. Now that I'm older, I know that. Back in the day, I just thought it was good playing, and it was. It definitely, that's pretty much all it was. However, on this album, they experimented more with cinematic tones, like on A Little Piece of Heaven, which is still just an incredible piece of work that almost didn't make the album. And pieces like Lost that use autotune in such an interesting way, blatant, crazy autotune in such a great way, as well as talkbox filters. And Scream, which has one of the coolest metal guitar solos I think I've ever heard. Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. If you haven't heard it, it's a classic. Check it out. I think even the fan base would agree. We're going to calm things down a little bit by moving to Passing By Behind Your Eyes by Pretty Lights. This is an artist and producer that I don't really hear anything about anymore, and that could be because he hasn't really dropped anything big. But Pretty Lights has the most unique sound. It is a direct blend of EDM and turntable style scratchy hip hop. The way that Pretty Lights would cut up samples was definitely unique. I don't even think I've heard anyone try to imitate his sound before. If they have, it's probably very subtle because I am yet to come across any artists that sound like Pretty Lights, but the songs on this album are great. It's actually directly tied with multiple of his projects. These were some of the most unique works I heard out of my big EDM phase and my EDM like sort of culture and inspiration that got me to this point. But yeah, I'd recommend this album to anybody. It's great passive music. Art Angels by Grimes. Great piece of experimental pop. This was actually my introduction to Grimes' music. I have heard the name, like before I listened to this album, I heard the name before. I think you guys even wanted me to break this down. Maybe at some point we can do sort of like a re-listen video where I check it out more in detail with my newer setup. I haven't heard the project in full in quite a bit. Probably in, man, I'm trying to think. Yeah, it's been a hot minute. But even the song's outro, Butterfly, is great. Flesh Without Blood is, in my opinion, one of Grimes' most catchy songs, but it also doesn't refrain from some of her darker experimentation on things and some of her Siouxsie and the Banshees influence as an artist. Miss Anthropocene is just as good as this album, in my opinion. Art Angels is a nice in-between and definitely what I think is her sort of magnum opus. Speaking of magnum opuses, we have Trench by 21 Pilots. This could be tied with the Clancy Breach combo we've gotten in the last 2 years. As you guys saw, I did talk about the recent Breach album, and I will clear the air here. I thought the story started with Trench. You guys corrected me. It started with Blurry Face and arguably Vessel. But I do want to do a lore dump, kind of deep dive on what Tyler and Josh have built across their discography here, most notably with Trench. Trench is where I started to kind of notice that there was a story or a concept being told here. I knew on Blurry Face there was like a character happening, but regardless, from a musical standpoint, this to me is 21 Pilots at their best. This is a S tier album for me. Just so dynamic all the way through. It bleeds seamlessly. You could just tell there was so much time put into this dang album. Meteora by Linkin Park. This was my introduction to what is my favorite band. I was too young to really get into them during Hybrid Theory, but I did kind of listen to both albums simultaneously, side by side. Like I'd pop them in and out of my CD player depending on what I was feeling. And same with Minutes to Midnight. When that came out and I got my own copy of it, I would just switch between the three albums depending on what I was feeling. This is, in my opinion, the best nu metal album of all time. It has a lot of pop tendencies, which got a lot of people into it. Arguably, same with Hybrid Theory. Sometimes I even consider them the same album, you know, because their sounds are so interchangeable. This is considered widely to be the darker, older brother of Hybrid Theory, because it is a bit more mature when it comes to a songwriting standpoint. The band really found some really cool places to take their roots on this one. Who wouldn't agree with songs like Breaking the Habit and my favorite Linkin Park song of all time, Numb? Violator by Depeche Mode. This is a band that directly influences a lot of the songwriting and electronic tendencies, my favorite band, Linkin Park. And I didn't know that until way later, but I've always loved the sound of Depeche Mode. Whenever MTV or VH1 would be on when I was a kid and they would play the music video for Enjoy the Silence, I always found the sound of that song to be very soothing, very peaceful, but it has some sort of pulse or energy to it. Same with Personal Jesus, same with The World Through My Eyes, same with Clean. I mean, they just have so many good songs on this thing front to back. As I've gotten older, I got more into their music and started dissecting a lot of their older catalog and even some of their newer releases. Shout out to Ghosts Again. That was an awesome sort of comeback for the 2020s for Depeche. Good Faith by Madeon. This is a very colorful album. This album saw Madeon embracing a lot more influence from indie pop and getting a bit more expressive with his voice. On his previous album, Adventure, the songwriting tendencies were a bit withdrawn. They were kind of lended more to other artists and bands, notably Passion Pit, Dan Smith from Bastille. This album sort of saw Madeon taking his sound in a new direction and also just honing it, kind of making it his own. Cataclysm by Crywolf. This is a very unique artist, kind of like a couple others that are on here. I don't know why this artist has just stuck with me so much. Crywolf started in the dubstep scene. Here's what his first sort of piece of work was when I first discovered him. However, this album, when it came out, was him sort of embracing more songwriting tendencies than ever before, leaning more into synth pop while also keeping the EDM bass music edge to his music. and some of his roots from songs like Neverland and The Home That We Made. But this album kind of showed like a very vulnerable yet cinematic, very trippy kind of sound to it. And it'll always hold a special place on my list, I think. I couldn't make this list without this album. Starboy by The Weeknd. We haven't talked about The Weeknd on this channel. I would like to, because I think Abel has a very big catalog with a lot of music, and a lot of it's very iconic at this point. I do really like the After Hours, Dawn FM, Hurry Up Tomorrow sort of trilogy that has come out recently, but I will say, just for me personally, Starboy is kind of his peak. It's kind of his sort of magnum opus, if you will. We talk a lot about that in this video, but it's true. In my opinion, this is sort of what pivoted his sound from that darker R&B that we saw on albums like Trilogy and Beauty Behind the Madness, but it started pushing it more into that Daft Punk, synth pop, electro energy that we started to see kind of come to the surface here, with a lot of color and a lot of variety in albums to follow it. Also, having 2 Daft Punk features on here totally, just in my opinion, transformed maybe what Abel was going for originally on this thing, and kind of set the mood, set the tone, set the soundscape for a lot of these songs to sort of blend together. And what I like about this album in particular, it isn't exclusive to just pop. You still have a lot of really big callbacks to his R&B roots in songs like Reminder and 6 Feet Under. Skin by Flume. We're talking about it, guys. We're talking about it. The iconic, legendary, most popular album from Flume, which is one of my favorite producers. This thing is incredible. You know, I can just keep talking up. I can talk up all these albums on here, but I could definitely talk up Skin for sure. Even the Skin Companion was great. I like Palaces just as much. I think, like, if I were to put them together, I like Palaces just as much because it's more polished. For its time, this album was way ahead of its time. It feels like an album that would release like nowadays, or even in like early 2020. But I think this thing came out in 2016, 2015, 2016. I don't know. Either way, I was all over this when it came out, because I had just gotten into Flume shortly before. I started kind of listening to his back catalog and going, "Oh wow, that's a lot of sounds there. That's a lot of attention to detail in the production bed," and that's definitely heard on here. What I like is you have the intricate production for production heads like me, but you also have a lot of vocal features on this album for people that are more pop heads, and that's what made it accessible. Having artists like Tuvlo on here or Luna George really kind of gave way for pop heads and R&B heads to get more into electronic music, and that's where this album succeeds in my book, is making a nice fine line between, hey, we're progressing the genre somewhere, but we're also leaving room for people to not just get lost in it completely. Midnights by Taylor Swift. This album would be very high on my list, especially for pop albums. It's directly tied with 1989 and Reputation. I'm a sucker for Pop Taylor. This album hits all the high notes for me, while also giving a lot of variety too. Like, there's a lot of variety here, and it's kind of one of her albums where, even though it has a lot of tracks, if you're listening to the bigger deluxe version of it, has a lot of tracks, but they bleed into each other seamlessly while also not sticking to the same genre every time. Pretty much every song on here has a different genre. I think that's great for a pop album, and I think it's a very colorful, very pretty album. It feels to me like a more mature 1989, like it's the sound of 1989, but with more of a soulful, almost lo-fi house kind of element to it. Very 2020s, very kind of moved on from that sort of era. Yeah, under those top 3, I'd probably put Folklore. I wish I could put Folklore on here, but there's not enough room for such great music. And yeah, I would say Midnights is definitely a win for anyone that wants to hear it for the first time. From Zero by Linkin Park. I talked about this a bit in my tier list video, where I talk about some of the band's catalog just as a whole, but this to me was their to the world, it's no secret this album was their comeback. It is such a strong comeback, and yeah, I'd say even if you're not a hardcore fan of the band, hearing their new dynamic with their new lineup is exciting. It's different, it's thrilling, it might be hard to swallow, but you can't deny that the musical ability of the band, even so far off of a break, like even so far into like a break period, it just still sounds good in 2020 2024, 2025. I got to see them pretty recently on the From Zero tour, and I have no regrets. It was one of the best moments of my life. Notes from the Underground by Hollywood Undead. So this band to me has matured a lot over the years. They definitely come a long way from some of their more cringe or just inappropriate behavior and lyrics from early in their career. I grew up with this band. As I got older, I kind of distanced myself a bit more from their older catalog and started appreciating moments like this on this album, where they still inherited some of those party tendencies and some of those more punk and sort of just attitude driven lines that they are known for. Started progressing their sound in more of a direction that was a bit more tolerable or a bit more for a wider audience. And I think this album was very important for them because it sort of established them as not a rock band with rappers in it, but a rap group that has rock influences and industrial influences. Like, I feel like Nine Inch Nails' Pretty Hate Machine and Downward Spiral is all over this, and you really got to look for it because it's covered up with some of their typical Hollywood Undead isms. But this is a very special album to me because it just takes me back to high school. It takes me back to some of the good times, and there's a lot of unique songs on here in the band's entire catalog. Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die by Panic at the Disco. This is the other Panic at the Disco album on here, and it is my favorite album from the band. It is, in my opinion, their best collection of songs. It covers a wide variety of genres, from alternative rock to synth pop. Even they started implementing some of their jazz influence on here. There's some pop punk influence too, and This Is Gospel is a pretty song too. Even if you're not a Panic at the Disco fan, I would highly recommend songs like that, or even some of the deeper cuts like Casual Affair, and my favorite, Far Too Young to Die. We're getting there, guys. Bear with me. We're on to number 5, Iridescence by Brockhampton. This album is incredible because it shows the group moving away from the Saturation trilogy. I did not get into the band during the Saturation trilogy. In fact, I got into them pretty much right when they dropped this project, but I did listen to their other music first before diving into this because I wanted to know what's up Brockhampton. Upon pretty much when I was listening to these guys for the first time, I was doing a lot of like delivery jobs where I'd be in the car a lot, so having a bunch of big albums to listen to while I did that was just great. I also would have on in the background the American Boy Band docuseries, which kind of educated me on the members a bit and kind of showed me kind of what the Brockhampton thing is, like what are they. And I liked how welcoming their sort of thing was. They didn't care, they didn't discriminate, there was none of that. It's just a very welcoming fan base as a whole. And despite all the drama and kind of hard times that the band has been through, they are one of my favorite groups of all time. I would say they're more than just a hip-hop collective to me. They do a lot more than that, and I believe they deserve the credit for that as well. This album is just my favorite from them, so it's on this list. I could literally put any Brockhampton project on here, maybe except for The Family. I could put pretty much any Brockhampton project on here in its place, but I like Iridescence the most. Worlds by Porter Robinson. This was directly tying with Nurture and Smile. I like every Porter Robinson project, but Worlds just hits the right spots for me. It is equally nostalgic as it is brilliant. This showed EDM people and producers and artists that you don't have to stick to your typical build-up, drop formula. You can experiment with things like chiptune, synthwave, pixel pop, whatever you want to call it. You can literally just build your own world in your music, and that's what I have always taken away from this album. Palisades by Palisades, or also known as their self-titled album. This came a little later in the band's career, and I was pretty broken when they broke up. No, seriously, like I do really miss this band. I've seen them live twice. They're incredible. Lou is a fantastic vocalist, definitely underrated, and I think that this band definitely deserved more than what they got. They were an incredible sound, a great twist on post-hardcore, metalcore with EDM club tendencies in some of their earlier work, as well as kind of more gritty industrial influences in some of their later stuff, and a little bit of emo in there as well, a little bit of emo and pop punk to some of their songs, and just straight up hardcore for some of them. But they're an incredible band. If you like stuff a little heavy but also equally melodic and catchy, they're a fantastic band to get into, and I would actually recommend starting with not this album but the 2 albums before it, Outcasts and Mind Games. We're into the top 2 now, with number 2 being the Scary Monsters and Nice Sprites EP by Skrillex. This to me is such an obvious like top project for me. It's not really an album, but neither was the Sanctuary EP by KOAN Sound, so it is what it is. This album is crucial. If this album did not come out, I probably would have never pursued production, and I would have probably pursued being in a band instead. And thankfully, because of Skrillex and his earlier work, I was able to see that, wow, there's a lot you can do on a laptop. And I got a laptop for my birthday and started learning how to produce using FL Studio, and that was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. Number 1 would be Living Things by Linkin Park. This to me is their best piece of work. It combines the sound of their older material, their first 4 albums, and combines it into this fantastic piece of 12 songs that flow together seamlessly. It's a very unique sound for an album. It's a very airy, atmospheric sound. And all the band members on this thing just performed incredibly. The production is top notch. It's very electronic. It's very early 2010s, but if you can get past the dated sound of it, the songs are just amazing in my opinion. I can talk about this album forever. I could talk about every song that's on it, but just know it's my number 1, and it's always an album I go to reference for various projects. So there you have it. Those are my top 50 albums of all time, and why they're special to me, why they're on this big album list. Again, this kind of stemmed from just a stupid little idea. Like, I just wanted like a cool looking wallpaper, but then I thought about it. I was like, what albums would I want to just be isolated and stuck with till the end of time? And that would be it for me. A little bit of stuff from the old, a little bit of stuff from newer music, and a lot of stuff from sort of my upbringing and my adolescence and my childhood. But these albums just kind of helped me sort of find my footing in music and enjoying music, and maybe I'll swap some out and add some in the future, but for now, these would be my top 50 albums. If you guys have a personal ranking, or if you guys have certain things that are special to you and certain projects that just have a sentimental meaning for you for whatever reason, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'd love to maybe check out some of your guys' music tastes and maybe get the conversation going on what some of our favorite music is, but this to me would be mine personally. Thank you guys so much for watching. I just wanted a nice little fun video to celebrate 1,500 subscribers. Thank you guys so much, and be on the lookout for this Friday. We're more than likely going to be doing Big Fish Theory by Vince Staples. Feel free to go vote last minute. Either that, and regardless, guys, the Patreon exclusive will be live for you all in a month. I'm really excited to check out both of the projects that are on this week's poll. And thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day.